So I still haven't found a way off of this spaceship, but I think I found an owner's manual. Jose666 asks, will the next Caster's Cup have more requirements, like how for the last one you had to play in an official event to get in, due to these sicker prizes? And Mike said, good question, we're working on figuring this out. And that's because the Caster's Cup 2023 prize pool will be $1.5 million. There has been speculation that you'll need to qualify at some form of regionals, and Towers has been recently announced, but we're still waiting on more information about that. Basic Trainer asks, MetaZoo Hype Man job openings when? And Mike says, air day. And really, he's not wrong. If you want to be a hype man for MetaZoo, become a content creator. There are many different platforms that you can create content for, and the only thing holding you back is yourself. If you're waiting until you're ready to take the jump, you're never going to be ready to take that jump. You need to jump in and get used to it. If you look at some of the older videos of this channel, they weren't that great, but over time, things improved, and we're at where we're at today. So really, if you want to be a MetaZoo hype man, jump in, start creating content, and for the love of God, stay away from the drama. Flork asked, is there any update on the idea you teased about early Discord members getting promos to reflect that, i.e. ranking of the top 100 or 200 or something like that? And Mike says, soon. So this is in reference to the Discord medals. It hasn't been announced how those are going to be distributed, whether that's going to be the most active members in chat, possibly by the Discord ranking, or if it's going to be more of who MetaZoo feels has been most productive to the chat. To go alongside that, Streamy Weenie asked, have you figured out the metal cards for the Discord contribution cards with the printer? And Mike said, almost there. This is a new territory for MetaZoo, and the way that they work with their printers, they like to push the envelope a little bit. They like to push the printers to the extent of new technology. And we're seeing that with Wilderness, UFO, etc., with how the holo patterns are, how they really pop. And in the future, there's been hints that we might get hologram holos. MKE Cyborg asks, Mike, in the future, will I be able to exchange my F5 key for a special promo card or some other exclusive MetaZoo item at an event, or through mailing it in similar to the skateboards? Mike said, probably not, but keep refreshing, who knows what might change. And this is interesting here, the F5 keys did not come with a promo. I think some people thought they were going to, but as of right now, what you have is a nice little F5 key, MetaZoo themed. BV1 asks, are the poker sets only being offered through Kickstarter or eventually open to the public? And Mike says, other than some excess inventory going to our partners, these were Kickstarter exclusives, so some partners will have the Faded Spade Kickstarter boxes. And I think this is actually pretty great, because yes, it's not so great that Kickstarter items are available outside of Kickstarter, but they're being very open about the excess stock, which is going to be from people canceling their orders or backing out, and they want to get that to the community, so the partners are the best way to do this. So if you missed out on the Faded Spade Kickstarter, keep an eye on your favorite partner to see if they will have allocation of the Faded Spade playing cards. Am I Ghost asks, have the playing cards been shipped out yet? And Mike says, starting to ship to us. So this would mean that they're a little bit behind schedule from the last Kickstarter update on shipping. They're only about a week late at this point, and we've been waiting a while anyway, so yes, delays aren't great, but in the grand scheme, it's really not that much longer to wait. SirMeow6 asks, is the poker chip box cardboard or plastic? It's hard for me to tell from the picture you posted, and Mike says premium cardboard. So if you haven't seen a picture of that yet, this is what it looks like. And this is the box that holds the poker chips. Echoes asks, will the Uncut sheet add-ons have the left layout or the right layout? The left layout that he's referring to is the cards that are multiples of the same card printed in a row. The right side is the holographic pattern for the Uncut sheets. Mike says yes, and that's because it's probably going to be both. There's probably going to be a mixture of both. There's going to be extras left over, and those are going to be randomly distributed amongst those who got the Uncut sheets, or those who are randomly getting them slipped into their packages. Zaxpax asks, any update on fan art submissions? And Mike says, on my to-do list this week. There's a lot going on with MetaZoo right now, and he will be getting to the fan art submissions. And one thing to note here is that comparable to a lot of the other things going on, these can wait a little bit. The outcome of the fan art contest isn't really due until the cards need to go to the printers, so there's a little bit more wiggle room with the fan art contest than, say, UFO or Seance. Metacaster 1P36 asks, Mike, when will the UFO NFT booster boxes drop? Sticker still under the wrap? And Mike says, yep, soon. I personally have not been part of the NFT drops for the booster boxes. I don't know when these typically drop, but I imagine they're probably going to drop alongside UFO on Friday or shortly after. Cryptid Collectibles asks more partnership openings when? And Mike says end of August, so we already knew that it was going to be before Seance, and this gives a better timeline for the partnerships. So if you're an LGS that did not get on the partnership list this round, in about a month and a half, you will have another chance. Zeke1993 asks, any special prize if you get your passport stamped? I got one of the Afton drawing passports and I'm in love with it. And Mike says, soon. So it's been assumed that with these passports that have been announced, if you collect the stamps, there's going to be some form of prize that's associated with that. And it's unclear at this time, do you have to collect all of them, which would be very expensive in travel expenses, or do you get a different tier of prizes for getting a subset? So I'm really excited to see what they do with these passports. I think it's an amazing concept to reward those that are going to the conventions, and I hope they continue to do it in the future. Skits asks, how are people getting the passports already? And Mike says, a couple hundred. I think he was confused. I think Mike thought he said how many passports have been given out, which is a couple hundred. And the answer here to Skits' question is that the passports were available at San Diego Comic-Con, and they're also going to be available at Roswell next week. It's still unclear if they're going to be available past that or where, but there have been some hints that they might be at further conventions. With the stamps being expected at Collecticon Long Beach, I would expect that the passports will also be available there. Hyperfocus Info asks, can we get a Paul Bunyan card soon? And Mike says, good news for you, and maybe he's not so hyper-focused, because Paul Bunyan was released as a theme deck in Wilderness. And I have some extras of those, so Hyperfocus, if you reach out, I will send you one. IMZorZ asks, can we lower the number of blindfolds for future PFP sets? And Mike says, we will definitely be looking into feedback for future drops. The blindfold PFPs are obviously the least desirable. The PFPs that are at floor typically tend to be the beasties that have blindfolds on. And I know for my personal preference, I don't care too much for the blindfolds. I do want to see the eyes, and I do prefer much cleaner PFPs over ones with multiple attributes. Legit Backsasser asked, hey there, will the PFPs be turned into physical cards? And Mike says, yup. There will be associated PFP card sets. It's unclear if those are going to be related to the MetaZoo card game or more like the Tops boxes, but we can expect those in the future, and they will only be available to holders of PFPs. Fane asks, will there be benefits of collecting all 12 Beastie PFPs? And Mike said, good question. And this is something that I was wondering myself, because this is something they did with the MetaZoo tokens as well. Holders of all 10 MetaZoo tokens get special benefits. They get special care packages. I would imagine that I'm not the only one that's also thinking this. I almost have my full set complete as of the recording of this video. I only need a Cumberland Dragon and a Hodag. Koshi asks, MetaZoo, the PFPs are a hit. Are you going to correct the PFP pictures that have elements not reflected in the metadata? A lot of them have horns on the pictures, but not in the data. And Mike says, working on it. And that's something that I noticed as well early on in Trait Sniper. I was looking for as clean PFPs as possible because, again, I like the ones that don't have attributes, the ones that are actually closest to the actual beastie. And I did notice that some of the ones with horns were showing up in my search results. So I'm really glad to hear that they're working on that. Ice9 asks, how will new PFPs be released? Drop to holders or minted, worry about it being a frenzy, and Mike says it will likely be a frenzy but one exclusive to current PFP holders. As I've said in past videos, PFP holders of the original release of the one that just dropped are the only people that can mint future PFPs. With future PFP sets being limited to 1,000 mintable PFPs, there will be a frenzy of the existing PFP holders trying to mint their UFO PFPs and beyond. Relwolf asks, when will you allow PFP holders into gated NFT channel? Mike says, talking about it. The NFT channel has a Fight Club stance on it. You don't talk about it. But yes, there are talks about that going on. Ice9 asks, regarding PFP cards, do rarer PFPs lead to rarer cards for their holders? Mike says yes, the card rarity will be reflected by the PFP rarity. And to follow up on that, Ice9 asked, thanks, follow-up, will this be one SKU for everyone with just one random assortment of PFP cards? Will there be a way to ensure we can get a card of our particular PFPs? And Mike said no, they will be blind boxes like a booster box. So yes, PFP holders will get a chance to own PFP physical cards. You're not guaranteed to get the card that you own. I am hoping that we can work together to get people the cards that they own. I would love to own my Mothman, but who knows how that's going to go down when that's out, or if there's going to be multiple copies of particular cards. These Hands IO asks, why no PFP of Sam St. Clair? And Mike says, not a bad idea, so I imagine that we're going to be seeing Sam St. Clair in the future. Red Baron 1XX asks, hey Mike, I've been hearing about MetaZoo and Sandbox. Any chance PFPs will have functionality with this? Mike says, yes, we will have MetaZoo characters in Sandbox. For those of you that don't know what Sandbox is, it's essentially a metaverse-based sandbox game, so think Minecraft or The Sims, that's about community building and going on and being with an online multiplayer group. As the name suggests, it's a sandbox game, so you can do basically whatever you can think of, within reason of what's been programmed. Veets asks, will PFPs have utility just like NFT coins? And Mike says, nope, the only PFP utility is access to the card sets, which isn't fully true because the original PFPs that just dropped do allow you to mint future PFPs, but basically, yes, you get access to these card sets. SpaghettiMon.eth asks, when can we expect the first drop of PFP cards? And Mike says November. So we'll get those at the end of the year after Seance and before SCP. I had one of my questions answered this week. I said, when can I get a Mothman plushie? I need something to snuggle at night. And Mike said, very, very soon. Now, typically, soon is the answer for, sometime soon. But with the extra varies in here, I do think we're going to be seeing these sooner than later. And that's a good segue to the next question. Umbreon's Rock asks, will there be plushies at New York Comic Con? And Mike says yes. And the New York Comic Con isn't until early October. So is that very, very soon? We're going to find out. We have a question from HappyKitty05, which is, what is the beastie on the Blood Moon Terra? It's also one of the ones on the UFO pop-up at conventions. Mike says Ravenmocker. And I was really excited for this question because the Blood Moon Terra, which is done by Lily, who's also one of my favorite artists for MetaZoo, is one of the favorite cards that I've seen from the UFO set so far. And I can't wait to see what this Ravenmocker is. HappyKitty05 then followed up with, is the Ravenmocker a release event box or theme deck card, or is it an unreleased product? And Mike said, I wonder. My guess here is that it actually is going to be part of the release event boxes if it's featured in other art like this. Another question from HappyKitty05, would you ever consider ideas from the community for cards in the SCP set? And Mike says, of course. And this is a good reminder that there is a Request a Cryptid channel in the Discord, so if you have ideas about things you want to see, you can go there and talk about it there. Ravenmocker was one of the cards that was mentioned previously in that chat. Jerk asks, I still want a full-size rulebook or bestiary, and Mike says, same. This would be amazing. The little book is little. That's all I got. I just want a bigger one. Fiery asks, any more mini sets this year? And Mike says, SCP. And Jas asks, any updates on SCP? That's what I'm excited for. Mike says, right after Seance R&D, we get straight to work on that. So when Seance is basically out the door, they'll start working on SCP. And what we're seeing right now for Seance is that we're already getting teases before UFO has even hit street date. So I imagine we're going to be starting to see some of the results of SCP around the end of October. D1 called Diablo asked, the line is crazy at Comic-Con, would like to see what the haters say now. Mike says crazy considering the tickets sold out 3 years ago, and that's in reference to Comic-Con being sold out in 2019. Ticket holders could hold on to those tickets and come to the next San Diego Comic-Con, which happened to be 2022. So these people have been holding on to their tickets since before MetaZoo even went to Kickstarter. I talked about that a little bit in my last video and why that's a good thing. I think there was a lot of new blood getting into MetaZoo over the last weekend. I had another question answered. This one is, remember that time you sent stuff to space? Any plans to reveal more of what was sent? Mike says, UFO release day, the video drops. So this Friday, we can expect to finally see the Sent into Space video. Will we get a look at the 12 cards that were sent? I hope to find out. Crispy asks, when does the Smokey Bear come out? And Mike says, this week, I believe. It was said in the chat that mid to late this week we should start seeing the Smokey Bear blisters in Target. I'm going to be looking in my local area, if I can get back to my local area. Hidden Level asks, Topps Nightfall when? And Mike says, Spooky Halloween set? So it was always announced that the Topps Nightfall was going to be around the time of Seance. And it seems that the Nightfall release is actually going to be a Halloween release for Topps. Limbo asks, is there going to be a Topps X MetaZoo UFO in the future? And Mike says the art is already done. So that basically means it's ready to be printed, if not already. Topps Wilderness did come out a bit later than the Wilderness Course set. I imagine UFO might do the same to stagger the releases of the products. So it's definitely going to happen. We just don't know when yet. Olix asks, any update on the towers by chance? Mike said yes today. That update never dropped. I apologize. I can't talk about that. Streamy Weenie again with UFO song out when? And Mike says Friday. My guess is that this is actually going to release in the video with the Sent into Space cards. There was the video next to the cards. I imagine that whatever that video is going to be is also the UFO song and music video. Light asks, any chance UFO spoilers will be left over after Roswell for NFT holders? And Mike sent this gif of Dwight Schrute saying, shh. I don't know if this is confirmation that NFT holders get a chance to get spoiler cards that are left over, or if he's just saying, hey, don't talk about that. I could go either way on this one. Spuncaster asks, will UFO swag drop on the same date as UFO TCG? Mike says, yup. So this is going to be whatever's on the marketplace for shirts, apparel, bags, playmats, sleeves, etc. Those will all be available on release day. Abyssal Atorius X asks, any updates on the MetaZoo video game? And Mike says, soon. Now that the WME partnership has been announced, we know that they're working on the video game, the show, the comics, etc. So this is definitely happening. We don't really have a timeline yet, but from this next question for John Smith, on which console will the first MetaZoo video game be released, we do know that it's going to be released on PC. Light asks, when do you expect Wilderness X Revive to ship? Early August? Mike says closer to mid to late August. So if you did get one of the Wilderness Revive boxes, I expect we're going to see that at the end of next month, maybe a little bit later. We have still only seen 5 boards from the set. It's still up in the air whether Green Man is going to be one of the boards, and if so, I feel like that's going to be the chase. Now, there weren't a lot of unanswered questions this time around. This was a shorter MetaZoo hour than normal, so I have 3 that I'll answer. From Danny, we have our Valentine's and Wilderness Pin Club NFT airdrops coming soon, and yes, the plan was to wrap up the PFPs, and then as part of the roadmap, they would then focus on these things that still need to be buttoned up, like the airdrop. Matt95 asks, when will the UFO PFPs be released? Being only 1,000, will there be a allow list, and how will that be accessed? So I don't know when, I imagine probably sometime mid to late August, and there will be an allow list, and to get on that allow list, you just need to own one of the PFPs that are on OpenSea right now. Now is a good time to buy while people are offloading the ones that they didn't want or their duplicates, so if you do want to get on the PFPs, I would suggest you do that soon. And lastly, Anithios asks, will the second edition of Wilderness have the improved hollowing that UFO has? And the answer is no, and that's because there is no second edition of Wilderness. MetaZoo only did second edition for Cryptid Nation base set. However, to better answer your question, yes, any future Wilderness drops will have the special hollowing, the new hollowing. We saw this with eBay Wilderness, and I imagine that we're going to see this in the Smokey Bear promos and cards in the Smokey Bear blister packs as well. Well, there you have it, folks. There's the MetaZoo Hour for July 24th. There was a lot of good updates there, mainly focused on the PFPs. If you haven't already, I would suggest that you check out the most recent weekly update. There was a lot of good information there about what's been going on this week. It does have UFO spoilers in it, so be warned. And now, if you'll excuse me, I have a manual to read.